Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our session this evening on ethical leadership. My name is Cindy Pike, and with me is Lize Moldenhauer, MD of Omni HR Consulting. Welcome, Lize.
Thanks, Cindy.
Before we start tonight's discussion, I would like to take some time and give you some background as to why we are here. I'm currently busy with my MPhil in higher education at Stellenbosch University. The aim of my research study is to design, develop, and evaluate a blended learning module in leadership for adults in the workplace. I decided to design a module on ethical and authentic leadership. This is a 2 to 3 hour online learning module that can also be delivered as face-to-face or blended. This module will be released by Omni on OmniStack on 4 October 2021. In tonight's session, we will focus mainly on the introduction to ethical leadership within the organization. We will cover 3 topics. Firstly, we will discover the need for ethical leadership within the organization. Secondly, we will explore the different ethical traits and behavior. And finally, we will look at the 4V model and how it can be used to align our values, vision, voice, and virtue for the common good. First up, let's just deal with some housekeeping rules for ease of engagement. Please make sure your microphones are muted and all other devices as well. Please raise your hand if you have a question. Please feel free to engage with the moderator in the chat if you have something to share. And the session will be recorded and all attendees can look forward to receiving a copy of the recording post-event. Okay, so let's get started. So research into the 4th Industrial Revolution suggests that we are going into a time of unprecedented change. This change will be swift and it will have a significant impact on all industries, disciplines, and economies. Marriott in 2019 outlined 5 key forces that will affect change during the 4th Industrial Revolution, namely a truly connected world, social and organizational reconfiguration, human and machine collaboration, an all-inclusive, diverse talent market, and an exponential pattern of technological change. Lize, can you expand a bit more on these key factors and the impact they could have on organizations?
Thanks, Cindy. Yeah, I think one of the key things is we are definitely in the flux of change. So when we look at a truly connected world, everything is faster and everything is linked, especially within business. We've definitely developed in a way that it's no longer just a typical hierarchy structure, but more for us working in relation to matrix and project teams. When we look at social and organizational configuration, there's the autonomy of individuals needing to actually work and know why they're doing something becomes so important. It's not just a task and get the job done. It's actually understanding how it fits into the bigger picture. When we look at human and machine collaboration, I think we need to actually embrace the fact that machines and artificial intelligence and machine learning allows us to do things much faster, much quicker. And we've got to be better at actually being human. So let the machines do what the machines need to do, and let us actually capitalize on it by bringing the human factors into play in the working environment. When we look at the diverse talent, this for me, very passionate. I think we're working across generational. We've got to become okay with bringing youth into the system, understanding that depth of experience sometimes in a working environment is not necessarily necessary when we want people to be creative and innovative and think outside the box, be okay to actually engage people at that level. And then when we look at exponential patterns of technology and change is, how do we reimagine learning? How do we reimagine what we are currently doing, and also thinking about things that bit learning just in time, information that I need for the moment, and how do I engage with that? So for me, that's some of the key things that we're currently experiencing and that we as leaders need to focus on.
Cindy Lee? You just need to enable your mic, please. There we go.
Oh, I do that daily. Sorry. Thank you, Lisa. Research also suggests that adapting to these changes will require a new way of information processing, thinking, and learning. There's an urgent need to upskill and retrain employees to adapt to the changing environment, as 65% of tomorrow's jobs do not exist today. The upskilling and development of employees will depend on how capable leaders are. Leaders will have to inspire, they will have to motivate employees so that employees are ready to adapt, develop, and upskill. So this brings us where we will need leaders with a different and new mindset who can define, shape, and build the future. To achieve this, a more humane, ethical leadership is needed. A leadership that includes humility, empathy, open-mindedness, and excellent communication skills. Gallo and Lupik stress the importance of leadership development and state that a new model is needed. A model where leadership has not only a functioning radar to understand what is happening across the company, but also a moral compass to steer the ship in the right direction, guided by ethical choices and responsibilities. Not merely a change, but a true shift towards humane leadership where trust and respect permeate organizations. Leaders remain critical in determining the moral quality of society. They can either positively or negatively impact the entire world through their actions and behavior. The reality is actions and behavior without ethics can act like cancer that can erode the moral health of society. Research also suggests a direct relationship between ethical leadership and employees' attitudes and their satisfaction with their leader. It positively impacts the conduct of employees, who are more likely to go the extra mile and report problems to management. Other benefits could also include healthier workplace culture, increased loyalty, improved reputation, and scandal prevention. Lisa, can you think of any other benefits that you have experienced?
Sure. Before I answer that, Cornell, I can see you've got your hand up. Do you maybe have a question? Or did you maybe just put your hand up in error? Okay. So I think for me, if we look at the benefits that we are experiencing, we have a community beyond the walls of an organization. The broader context, the impact that we actually have on families, on family units, on being a contributor to the communities we actually find ourselves in. And we actually need to realize that the way we operate, the ethical framework of the organization actually has the ability to directly impact communities and communities in which we operate. So our immune system affects the immune system of communities and countries.
Thank you, Lisa. And this brings us to our next section. What is ethical leadership? Research suggests that ethical leadership can be reflected in various traits and behaviors. We ran a poll during the week to see which of the following traits people thought are most important. We focused only on 4, although there are many: integrity, honesty, kindness, and trustworthy. Can you share the findings with us?
Sure. So I'm going to read because I have got notes because I'm human. So integrity was at 70%, honesty at 7%, kindness at 12%, and trustworthiness at 11%. I think it's just important to also just mention that the total voting was 241 participants, and that's how the percentages landed at the end of the day, Cindy Lee.
Thank you, Lisa. So that brings us to our next section, which is ethical traits. Ethical leaders have traits such as integrity, dignity, respect, and social responsibility. They are seen as kind, honest, trustworthy, and fair individuals. Tonight we'll focus only on the following: integrity, dignity, respect, kindness, honesty, and trustworthy. It is important to note that this is not an exhaustive list, but rather a list to get you started in exploring your ethical traits. So the first trait we will look at is integrity. So Cambridge Dictionary defines integrity as the quality of being honest and having strong principles that you refuse to change. Tracy in 2016 stated that leaders with integrity may not be the most famous or flashy of leaders, and they don't care about that. Integrity means doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do, and that is what makes success. Lize, if I ask you, what does integrity mean to you?
Sure, it's definitely not an exhausting list, so I'm going to repeat what you said. So I think it's always difficult when you ask a leader, what do they mean by integrity, or how do they define it? So for me, and please, this is how I believe it is, it's definitely to be, your word needs to be your word. You need to be clear on what you stand for, and therefore it requires us to lead by example. It requires us to be willing to evolve. In other words, listen to other people's opinions and what they have to say, but it still needs to come down to what is right, what is the right thing to do. It is about respecting people. It's about granting everybody respect and not just some. Communicating openly. We're going to deal with being transparent a little bit later. Also, integrity for me is also your ability to manage stress. So just because you're under pressure and you don't have time or you don't have resources or money, making different decisions to what you would make if everything in your life is running smoothly. Integrity is actually found in the most stressful situations. And I think the last one for me that I reflected on, which I think is really important, is mediating or dealing with your people and your teams fairly. So it's not having a bias towards a person or to a team, and really being fair in the way that you bring balance to what people are experiencing.
Thank you, Lize. I think you make an important point here. It is important for us to, yes, we can look at what people say is integrity, but also just take a step further and ask us, what does it mean to us as individuals and within our organizations? So next up, we are looking at dignity. And the Cambridge Dictionary defines dignity as the importance and value that a person has that makes people respect you. Lize, why is dignity so important?
Because I'm quickly just going to go back to Margie's comment that she made with regard to that dignity doesn't necessarily mean refusal to change. And I do agree with you. I think for us just as leaders, we need to be clear on what we stand for. It's about being willing to evolve, listening to other opinions, but being true to what needs to be achieved, what is the right and the wrong. And then Cindy Lee, just to come back to what you asked around dignity, I think it's so important to allow people to be worthy of respect. It doesn't matter who the person is, what their background is. It's treating people with respect. Never thinking as a leader specifically that you're better than anybody. I think if you fulfill a role as a leader, and if we specifically look at from an ethical framework and we look at dignity from a leadership perspective, I think it is so important that we need to understand that as a leader, your job, you are made to serve others. You're not made to stand on the top and be the one giving out all the instructions. It is actually about serving and actually creating environments that other people can flourish in. So for me, Cindy Lee, those are some of the key things around dignity that is important.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Lize. Next up, we're looking at respect. So Cambridge Dictionary defines respect as admiration felt or shown for something that you believe has good ideas or quality. Northhouse suggests to show respect means to treat others as unique human beings and never as a means to an end. It requires treating others' decisions and values with respect. It also requires valuing others' ideas and affirming these individuals as human beings. I think what is key here for me is to treat others as unique human beings and never as a means to an end. And I think we need to ask ourselves if we've ever been guilty of treating people to get something. Lize, how important do you think respect is in the workplace?
Yeah, you just alluded to manipulation in your last statement. I think my simple answer to the question is it is critical. It's easy to give somebody respect when they show you respect. It's far harder to live out the value of respect when respect is not given to you at all, when you are actually being mistreated. And to rise above those circumstances and still be respectful within that disrespect that you might be a recipient of requires a lot of strength. So I think it is a very critical component. And linked to that for me as a leader when it comes to respect is it's nearly underlining for me, Cindy, it's having the ability to also apologize when we need to apologize, when we know, because we're human, we make mistakes. We sometimes in our actions or our behavior, we are disrespectful, and there might be mitigating reasons for it. But I think it's being humble enough to be able to say, I'm sorry. I reflected on the way I spoke to you yesterday or what have you, and apologize. And I think that in itself creates a wonderful environment for people to breed respect with each other, and it enhances the environment within the workplace.
Good point. Thank you, Lisa. So next one we're looking at is kindness. And when we look at kindness, I would like to share a few quotes from well-known individuals. Desmond Tutu said, do a little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Mark Twain said, kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. According to Henry James, 3 things in human life are important. The first is to be kind, the second is to be kind, and the third is to be kind. Lisa, how important is kindness in the workplace, and can it be perceived as weakness?
It is important, simple answer. And yes, I think sometimes people do perceive being kind as weak, but it is definitely not. Kindness comes or links back for me with element of respect. Simple things like showing care for a person, asking how they are, and genuinely actually asking how they are, really caring about if the whole person is okay, is important. And for me, kindness is found in our ability to treat a person as a whole person, not just being kind for a means to an end. In other words, I need to be kind to you because I need something from you. So I'm going to be sweet now, I'm going to smile, and then I'm going to lay it with, will you please write that report and have it ready for me by 8 o'clock? For me, it is very much, it should be substance. There should be substance in that conversation because I should care about you as a whole person and treat you in that manner.
Yeah, that is really true. Thank you, Lisa. Next up is honesty. Cambridge Dictionary defines honesty as telling the truth or able to be trusted, not likely to steal, cheat, or lie. Thomas Jefferson said honesty is the first chapter in a book of wisdom. Connors states that honesty promotes openness, empowers us to enable us to develop consistency and how we present the facts. Honesty sharpens our perceptions and allows us to absorb everything around us with clarity. So honesty is not just about truthfulness, it also includes integrity and authenticity. It includes being real with yourself and with others about who you are, and what you need. Lisa, is it always easy to be honest as a leader?
No, it's not, because we're human. We don't like being vulnerable sometimes or finding ourselves in situations where we need to be truthful to that level, because it can sometimes lead to conflict if you're really honest, because people have difference of opinion. But for me, honesty, I always look at honesty in relationship to kindness. So for me, honesty, truthfulness, without love, kindness, is really hard. And love or kindness without truth is weak. And I think it is so important that we need to understand that when we're honest, And if we think about feedback or performance feedback or whatever from a business context point of view, it's about having a balanced view always. There's always a way to tell somebody and bring a message across. It doesn't have to be in such a way that it cuts so deep that you scar the person from an emotional perspective. There is a way to be honest, that it is communicated still with care, with love, with kindness. And I think for us, from a business context point of view, that might sound like really weak, and business is supposed to be about business and bottom line, but that is also definitely how we've evolved as organizations and businesses, to the point that we've made earlier, is to say that we're part of an ecosystem, we're part of a community. And if we're part of a community, the people of the community are within our space. An organization is made up of people. So for me, honesty is critically important. It has to be there, because that feeds respect, trust, all of those elements. But it is also the way in which we frame it, the way we speak to each other, that becomes really important.
Thank you. That is an important point. Even though we're looking at these traits individually, one doesn't really go without the other.
No.
Not if you truly want to be an ethical leader.
Correct, yes.
Lastly, we're going to look at trustworthy. So Cambridge Dictionary defines trustworthy as able to be trusted. Present states that it is something earned over a period of time, after consistently being honest, always acting with integrity, never lying or misleading. It is how you act. It is who you are. In my opinion, trust is key. As humans, we develop our self-concept through feedback from people. And if we can't trust the feedback received by others, then that could lead to a lot of insecurity, which negatively impacts our self-concept. Lisa, why do you feel trust is so important?
Well, Cindy Lee, I think for me, trust is a foundation of any relationship. I always like to talk about relationship capital and having the right to speak into somebody's life. So having the right to talk to somebody, to engage with them, to be honest with them and transparent, and maybe give feedback on something specific. That for me comes off the back end of trust. Can they actually trust me as a person? That what I'm saying, what I'm engaging with, what I say I will do, I will do. And I think that trust also allows us as leaders, if we want to build real trust, there's elements of vulnerability. The more intimate a relationship becomes, and the more closer you become. If we think about the team levels of forming, norming, storming, performing, when you get to a performance phase, as team members and as leaders, you are actually vulnerable with each other. You are also honest, and you trust that the other person will do it, because you work with each other. You found a rhythm, and in that relationships actually lead to actually really being authentic, real with each other. So trust is a given. I think when trust is broken, it actually takes a lot for it to be rebuilt. So building it first time takes time, but broken trust takes even much longer to get that back.
Thank you. That is so true. Do you think you can always repair broken trust?
No, personally, no. Because I think too, it's got to do with the depth to which the trust has been broken, and also if we look at how reliant the relationships or the people in the relationship were to each other. So what's the consequences? I think the broken trust, if it has severe consequences, it's a big ask for people to rebuild the trust. It's not that it can't be done. I just think in some instances it actually does impact people quite a lot, and it takes a lot of energy to rebuild that, and time, and vulnerability, and willingness to change and evolve. And I don't think people are always ready to put that amount of effort into rebuilding.
Good point. Thank you so much for sharing. So next, we first looked at a few traits, not all of them, but a good point to start. So next up, we're going to look at ethical behavior specifically. We're going to focus on 4, which is fairness and justice, decision-making, transparency, and setting standards. So first up, fairness and justice in a business refers to treating employees and your customers fairly, equally, and consistently. Ethical leaders apply fairness in how decisions is made, but not just how decisions are made, but also the outcome of their decisions. Ethical leaders also include fair and balanced and principled decision-making, which is not based on preference. And transparency will be revealed through the attitudes and day-to-day behaviors of leaders and employees. Transparency does not just include sharing information, but also the quality of that information. Lize, in your experience, is transparency difficult or is it easy?
Yes, I know. it's always a balanced view. I think it is important. Transparency is definitely important. To do it is not necessarily easy. And maybe I must just explain what I mean. So, as leaders, our job is to buffer the balance between the future view, where business is going, what needs to be achieved, and the stresses the organization is potentially experiencing, to what our teams need to achieve from their objectives point of view. And from a leadership point of view, to transparently speak about or share everything is not necessarily the burden everybody must carry, if I'm making sense. So there's sometimes a period of time that leaders need to carry information, carry the stresses, if I can put it that way, with potentially not divulging of what is happening or what are we going through or how are we dealing with stuff until the collective, the leadership, the board, the management team have made decisions that would be ethical decisions that's best for all. And that's why for me it's a balanced view. It's not being transparent. It is understanding that timing in transparency is as important as being transparent. Saying everything all at once is not necessarily serving everybody in the community. Our job is to know when do we need to share what, how do we need to share it, how do we answer questions, but it's not speaking with a split tongue. It's, in other words, not saying something to one group of people and another thing to another group of people. It's being true. And I think within, if we look at transparency, transparency becomes so important because it links back to trust. Because if you are not transparent, you're not necessarily seen as being trustworthy. Because people want to know what is going on. They want to be aware. But it is finding the right timing and framing it in such a way that you are not creating additional burden for people to carry.
Thank you, Lize. One aspect of organizational transparency includes setting of, sharing, and clarifying performance goals and expectations and responsibilities. This will also involve setting very clear ethical standards and expectations, as well as communicating those standards. Lize, can you share some challenges that you've experienced in making sure that your behavior remains ethical?
Yeah, I think, I'm in preparation for this session, I very much took some time just to reflect on my experiences. So I think that being ethical is not necessarily always being popular. I think that we need to understand that. Cindy Lee shared that within the introduction. They're sometimes polarized. Having an ethical standpoint or being able to say that this is the right thing to do does not always make for a popular decision in all cases, or a popular viewpoint, if I can put it that way. Another thing is being ethical and having ethical behavior as we say in leadership, it's lonely at the top. It's even lonely at the top when you're very ethical, because there is this black and white component. There's always gray areas, sure, and you need to be able to evolve and look at different scenarios of applying certain decision making based on policy procedures and ethical frameworks. But it is understanding that if you stand for something, or that you will not compromise on your ethical frameworks, it is lonely. And sometimes that even leads to exiting relationships, because you know that is not necessarily going to lead to an ethical engagement, or at the end of the day, it's not going to achieve the outcome that needs to be achieved. And sometimes, I know for me, there's been situations where I've walked away from, let's say, client engagements or situations that might have been quite lucrative from a financial point of view, but will definitely not be lucrative just from an ethical point of view, if I can put it that way. And then I just think as people in general, we do experience, when we are more ethical, discrimination. I think that people experience that ethics in a certain way. And I love, Stephen Covey always says, or not always says, in his book, he talks about even a group of thieves have values, which means that even people that apply ethics in a certain way have a base from which they work. And I think that's just a reality that we also need to realize, is that compass that we are using. It is important to understand that there's potentially sometimes different campuses that we actually engage with, and it is okay. I think as leaders, we also need to give ourselves permission to say, this doesn't fit into our framework. It doesn't fit into how we've set up our organization and our ethical framework. Therefore, this is not what we engage in.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next section, I see Andrew's asked an interesting question. How do you grow trust in a team that was broken by a leader before you?
With lots of effort. It's the quick answer. I think that is such a really good question, and I think it is something as leaders most of us potentially have faced in some way or form. I think from my side, if I'm faced with that, is being able to understand what exactly is the psychological climate, the emotional climate of that team, is really spending some time to understand what sits there, and what are some of the challenges, and how you potentially be vulnerable, how you potentially can overcome that. Because as a new leader, you are being seen through a filter that you never created. And it's being able to tell the team, I need an opportunity for you to see that filter does not necessarily apply to me, the new leader. But it takes a lot of effort.
I fully agree with you. For me, it's telling them, but also showing up ethically, consistently, and being transparent, and just being then building that relationship, that you can build that trust. And over time, and with effort, as you've stated, Lisa, you should be able to build trust with those people. So that brings us to our final section that we'll be focusing on tonight. And we are going to explore the 4V model by Dr. Bill Grace. So Dr. Bill Grace developed the 4V model of ethical leadership, which aligns our internal beliefs and values with the external behaviors and actions for the common good. Kahn 2018 stated that the 4V model suggests that people who want to become leaders and make a difference need to embrace an inner journey of integrity and make an outer commitment to the common good. So the first value that we are going to look at, the first V, we're going to explore is values. So values are at the top of the triangle. They are your ethical core values that leaders should base their actions on. This starts with an inner journey which begins with discovery, understanding, and commitment to our individual core values. How can we define our core values? We can define our core values by answering the following questions. Firstly, who do you admire? So to help you answer that question, there's a few questions that you can ask, like what is it about that person that inspires you? What admirable qualities do they possess? And what behaviors and actions would you like to emulate? Secondly, what inspires you to take action? To help you answer this question, think of a situation where you took a stand for something. What feelings motivated you to speak up? What were you willing to risk? And what was the result? And then lastly, when do you most feel like yourself? So think of two situations. One where you felt wrong. Who were you with? What feelings triggered that? And what was the cost of that experience? Also think of a situation where you felt real and authentic. Who were you with? What activities were involved? And what was the emotions and the outcomes of that experience? The next V that we will be looking at is vision. Vision is the ability of a leader to act in line with their core values. So CARD 2018 stated that vision is the ability to frame our actions, particularly in service to others, within a real picture of what it ought to be. The third V is voice. So voice is about being expressive and how we articulate that vision. According to Carr, claiming our voice is the process of articulating our vision to others in an authentic and convincing way that animates and motivates them to action. And the last V we will look at is virtue. Virtue stands for the common good. It's a symbol of conduct that separates ethical from unethical actions. CARD 2018 stated that understanding that we become what we practice, we foster virtue by practicing virtuous behavior that's striving to do what is right and what is good. So Lisa, the final big question for tonight is, how do you align your values, vision, voice, and virtue?
Okay, so we do have 2 hours. I'm only joking.
You'll have to summarize it for us.
I'm only joking. I think, so first of all, for me, what is really important is to firstly just acknowledge, and I'm purely talking from a leadership perspective and trying to be as vulnerable as I possibly can here, is being, I'm human, I make mistakes. So when I look at the model and I look at the needs that's built within the model, I first of all need to acknowledge that I'm not perfect, and in that, being imperfect is the ability to grow what I really would like to achieve from a growth point of view, from making a difference point of view, and what I always like to refer to as a purpose. So what is the purpose ultimately of why am I here? What do I need to do? So when I look at who I am as a person and what I would like to achieve and the difference that I want to make as a person, but also the difference that we want to make as an organization, what does that look like? How do we frame it? How do we go about it? Still making sure that we a good corporate citizen, for lack of a better word. And I think here for me also is very key is about saying that this is not about the destination. This is not about, oh, okay, it's nearly like when people say, I'm on pension now. You worked your whole life to go on pension. Great, you're on pension, now what? It's not about going on pension. It is about the journey that you went on, so that at the end of your work journey, we should be framing it or seeing it as a reward. It's a reward time. So what does the reward time look like? Because for me, I definitely don't want to sit at home and twiddle my thumbs. I still want to be engaged. I still want to be part of. So for me, within this framework, when I look at my purpose, I want to be able to see it as a journey. It's also a journey of continuous character building. I think as leaders, we need to get that you are never at a point where you have everything to be effective. You have to be part of the continuous professional development, learning framework, if I can put it that way. We've got to buy into the concept of being champions of learning the whole time, being champions of change, being willing to look at what is happening externally in our environment and how is that actually impacting us from a values perspective, from a vision perspective, from our voices perspective, and from our virtue point of view. And, you know, for me, it is like when you have a higher consciousness as a person, you have the most responsibility to do the right thing. So when you know more, when you're aware of things, you have to do the right thing. It is one of the hardest things to do. It's hard to be on point and to frame. So I'm aware of the purpose that I would like to achieve as a leader, but I also look at that of how do I support my team, my people, because as an organization, any organization is only as good as its people. Our human capital is one of our biggest blessings that any organization can have. And for us as a company, if I look at our values, which we refer to as our principles, because for us it is life enriching. It's actually got consequences that should make a holistic difference. It's not just the difference within the workplace. It's work and home, I think, has become a merger, and understanding that I'm a whole person as part of that. It's not just work. It's the whole picture. And if I may, for us as a company, Cindy Lee, for us, it's very important framing our principles and understanding that. But that stands on and is part of pillars. So what do we want to achieve? And there's 4 key ones for me, or for all of us, and that is definitely creating standards others are drawn to. So quality frameworks, quality engagements. The next one is making a significant difference in the communities we serve. We are part of an ecosystem. We are part of a broader context. It is our ethical responsibility to be a good corporate citizen, but it's to be a good citizen in relation to our staff, because that's the first people we serve. And if we serve them well, they will in turn serve the people we have to engage with, which is our learners, our clients, more effectively. And our people are part of communities. They go back home and they're part of a broader community. Thirdly, it's having collaborative partnerships, and those collaborative partnerships, because there's no ways we don't stand alone. We are part of a broader ecosystem. And we are not a one-stop shop. We need to work in relation to others, and that includes government. It includes legislation. It includes clients. So what is that value system? That is also why we have open source sessions, because we are part of an ecosystem. We want to give back. And then last one for us is being disruptive in education locally with a global reach. And for us, it is critically important that we engage within the context where we find ourselves within South Africa. This is where we want to make first line significant difference. We want to serve our country. But in the same breath, when we serve our country, we want to serve it in such a way that we are able to make a significant difference, because we actually are globally benchmarked. It's not just about what's happening here, it's also about the fact that we are a global citizen. There is a broader framework, there's bigger competitors. We can see that now within the space of how things have actually evolved with the global pandemic, working from home, access to global platforms. The reality is we can be anywhere in the world and work anywhere. So how do we engage that? How do we move and evolve where that is concerned? And I think that being clear on what your purpose is, if I can frame it like that, being clear on your voice, and your voice being consistent, and your values being consistent, that all ties back in for me around being true to what you say, your word being your word, being clear on what you would like to achieve. So for me, it's always an interesting discussion, because it's not a simple answer. I think it is complex because there's layers to it. And sometimes we actually find this purpose early on in our life, and we're very clear on what we want to achieve. Others of us find it later. And I think that's also where we need to be careful of judgment of each other, is to allow people the freedom to actually find their voice, their purpose, at their timing, not at ours.
Thank you. That's a really, really a good point. So, in ending off tonight, I want to ask all of you out there, like, a question. How are your values, vision, and voice in keeping with a common good? And that might be something to think about. Lisa, that brings us to the end of this evening. We are still around if there's any questions. So please feel free to pop questions in the chat. Or, yeah. Lisa, do you want to add in anything?
Yeah, I think from my side, it's if there's anybody that wants to share anything, please do. If there's any questions, I don't know, Cassandra, did we miss anything? Do you just want to highlight?
Yes, Lisa.
Oh, sorry.
There's been a very nice one, I guess, very early on in the chat, but there was a huge debate between Chris, Dustin, a couple of others that weighed in on the trait when you guys discussed the trait of transparency.
Yes.
And at what level are you able to share certain information, sensitive information? Could it be seen as not being transparent? So if you want to quickly have a look at that, that was pretty much the debate, agree, disagree.
Okay. So I think if I may weigh in, again, I think it's got to do with, so what is the context? What, you know, we have legislation, we've got POPIA that we have. So there's legislation that govern our environment. There's policy, there's procedure. And then there's, like I mentioned earlier, I think transparency, it is important to be transparent. So I think it is important to be transparent on the policy, on the frameworks, on those elements that exist. But some of the sensitive information is not necessarily something that everybody needs to know about. And I think as a leader, that's where your discernment needs to come in, but also to allow people to come and talk to you, to actually question, to say, I'm concerned, I don't understand why we can't get access to this information, and to have an open dialogue where that is concerned. I think globally at the moment, there's a major pushback against not having access to information. I think the big thing that we want is we want to know things. We want leaders to be honest with us. And if they are not transparent and if they are not honest, then it causes distrust in what they are saying. But again, as a leader, your job is the balance. But don't push people away or tell people, well, you're not allowed to know, or it's on a need-to-know basis. That's not necessarily transparency. That's avoidance. Take time to explain to people the why. If they understand the why, they'll potentially stay committed to supporting you as to why this information can't be shared at the moment. That's just how I feel about it. Not all information can be shared in the moment. It's got to do with timing, and it's got to do with explaining the why. But that is how I feel about it. Cindy Lee, I don't know if you've got a different take, or if somebody else has got a different take.
Perfectly. I fully agree with you on that. I think finding a balance as a leader is important between your different traits and behaviors. And yeah. Are there any other questions? What is the difference between morality and ethics?
You can shoot for that one first.
I would like to, and I can give you a few quotes, and I think people often use the terms interchangeably. And often people will say that, you know, ethics consist out of your moral code and conduct. I think that ethics includes your traits and behaviors, and as well as finding a balance, and that the one trait isn't there without the others. But I would be overshooting to say that there's a clear difference between them. I think it depends on who's explaining it, really.
I think also we need to, morality, ethics, and law there's a very nice debate, and I will potentially share that if you are interested, Tamelo. And it was actually framed really nicely, because sometimes law is neither ethical nor moral. It just is law. And I think that we need to be very clear that we have a moral compass, and then we have an ethical framework. And ethics for me, morality on the one hand, within business specifically, is not necessarily that what becomes the guiding or the framework. It's the ethics that become the framework to which we operate. But the foundation from which we draw, for me as a person, is the moral compass that's actually been instilled in us. But we could have polarized moral compasses, and that is sometimes where polarized views and polarized application of ethics then become a challenge, and it opens up huge debates. I don't know if did we miss something else? Kaz? Cindy Lee?
No, Lisa, no other questions that were missed, but a really great comment I'm looking for here from Blaze.
Yeah.
Trust-based vulnerability is key in leadership. Open communication about a vulnerability supports the creation of trust within teams and organizations. And I think you alluded to that earlier. No, I don't think there's any other questions I can pick up. Anything from your side, Cindy Lee?
I think I can pick up.
Cool.
I like the example, Cornell. I don't know how to say your name, so apologies. Sorry?
Quarterly, maybe.
Quarterly. Okay, thank you. It's Robin Hood. Such a good example. You know, he took from the rich to help the poor. So was he morally justified in his actions? Maybe, but it was not necessarily law, because the bottom line is he stole. So I think that's where the debate is. But there's a beautiful article, and I'd love to share it with the group, because it does. They actually in the article debate law, ethics, morality, in a very, very nice way, and I'd love to share it. And you guys can read it, use it, lose it. I think it might be worthwhile to just read it, especially if you're interested in it. And 100%, when we sign up to be leaders, it's about being a servant leader and serving others. So I don't know if there's any other questions from anybody. We're willing to take more questions.
Lily, I don't know, based on your research, and I think this is a really interesting one, it might be a research topic even, and I missed it earlier, where someone was commenting about the correlation between spirituality and ethical leadership. It will be interesting to see. So I'm not sure if you have any research you can share with us around that, and we can share with the group.
No, guys, I haven't done research to see the correlation. I think that people who are spiritual or religious would align their ethical traits and behaviors to that, and people who are not will align it to in a different way. So I do think that is very individual, but that is not where my research was focused on.
Lisa and Cindy, I think that's what we have for questions.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you everybody so much for joining us this evening. I hope you had an interesting discussion, and I hope you go back and just think about the different traits and behaviors that we spoke about, and how can you get started? Where are you within that spectrum, and how can you align your values, vision, virtue, and voice?
Yeah, I just want to, Andrew, yes, I just want to answer you because I'm not typing fast enough. Yes, this is already session 5, just to let you know. If you would like access to the previous sessions, we can arrange that. If you just contact Kaz, she can, or marketing@omniahrc.com, we can give you access to the other sessions. From my side, Cindy Lee, thank you very much for asking me to be part of this and allowing me the opportunity to answer some interesting questions and putting me on the spot, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. If there's anything else, please give us a shout. Cindy Lee and myself will still stay online till just after 6. So if you've got any other questions, you're welcome to leave it in the chat or enable your mic and we'll chat to you. Otherwise, from my side as well, thank you so much again, Cindy Lee, for having me and for everybody being here with us tonight.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. Thanks for being here and allowing me to put you on the spot. I had fun. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.